together, both Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the two big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Are they definitely done with Daniel Jones from this point? And any shot that Dable is off the sidelines, meaning he gets fired before next season?
They have a general manager in Joe Shane. Every big move has to get approval by ownership. So, look, the bottom line is they don't know who their future quarterback is past this season. Tommy DeVito's clearly not the answer. They don't have it. Drew Lock's not the answer.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions. Once again, his third 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome to hour number 3, live right here on the Early Line to start off this new week. It is a Monday morning. He is Donnie right side. I am Ben Stevens. Our third and final hour. We preview week number 10's finale on this Monday night in Los Angeles between the Rams and the Dolphins. We hear from you. We get the Pro Football Doc, Dr. David Chao's analysis, a look back on the injuries from the Sunday slate as well, the prop perspective with Tom Vecchio, a couple of basketball handicaps. Sounds like a pretty good third and final hour to me.
Love Mondays. You know this about it. Like, we get drained this weekend from all the excitement Saturday, Sunday, late nights watching football games. We got to perform on Mondays, but it makes it so much easier when the topics just write themselves and we can fill in the blanks. So we're ready for an action-packed third hour, getting some help from some guests here. Away we go. Exciting times. 2 hours down, 1 to go.
Absolutely so, DRS. And to end out week number 10, which of course begins the second half of this NFL season, week 10 comes to a conclusion tonight in the city of Angels. Inside SoFi Stadium, the Rams play host to the Miami Dolphins. The Rams have won 3 straight games to get back to 500 to stay in the playoff chase in the NFC. If Miami has anything left, of course, it has not been an easy season in South Florida with the injuries to Tua Tagovailoa. It needs to start tonight for the Dolphins as an underdog. But we wanted to hear from the people and how they were approaching this Monday night finale. We do that now with all of you in Fade the Public. What is the best bet for Monday Night Football? The question to all of you at SportsGrid. The Rams as just a 2.5-point home favorite. The Dolphins getting 2.5 as the underdog. Rather lofty total, but a primetime game. It's not a short week, and it's an extended week for both. 48.5 is that over-under. More people like the over in some scoring tonight than the under, but most people, Donnie, more than 44% now back in the Rams, laying 2.5 points at home to end out week number 10.
We got it right today. We really did. Now, granted, the ultimate contrarian play would be the Dolphins. You take a look at some of those lines out there, 50 to 60% of the tickets coming in here on the Rams, and that line not moving here because that's a key number of 3 to push through. And you also have a team fighting for the division because a team that's just fighting for some respect. I agree, though. The public is taking the right point of view. It's hard to win games on the road in the NFL as is, but I truly believe the Rams are the better football team overall than the Miami Dolphins. If we combine offense and defense and certainly where they're playing the football game tonight, which is in LA. So I agree, 44%, I'm with you here. I'll back the public tonight because I voted for the Rams at -2.5.
Yeah, I would agree, DRS. Again, the Rams have won 3 straight. They have covered in their last 2. Both of those 2 covers against the Vikings on the short week Thursday at home as a slight underdog. Last Sunday as a slight favorite in Seattle against the Seahawks. So competitive games expected. The Rams, in some form or fashion, have come out on the winning end. DRS, the Dolphins, as we have shared, an underdog last week on the road in Western New York against Buffalo. They cover as a hefty dog, but they do not win outright. Just 3-14 straight up as an underdog with Mike McDaniel. It's not great. Only 3 outright victories in that span. 3-15, excuse me. And Donnie, when you're booked as an underdog, you're not expected to win outright necessarily, but you would expect a couple of upsets, at least with a talented playoff team in those previous 2 years, 7-11 against the number. But for the Dolphins, trying to hold on to hope for an outside shot at the postseason, it's not just keeping this game close, it's winning outright. Let's get to that total, 48.5. Just how much offense do we see tonight in Los Angeles?
It's going to be up to the Miami Dolphins, because I don't think the defense is all that good, but we always talk about, Ben, the key term, running mate here. I think you have a pretty good running mate. Matthew Stafford can sling it. Sean McVay is one of the best offensive play callers in the NFL. Mike McDaniel has all his toys again on the field and healthy. There's no reason to believe that we're expecting a ground game tonight that's going to control both sides, but you do have 2 electric running backs that can hit home runs. Kyron Williams is sensational, maybe one of the least talked about really good running backs in the NFL. We all know about Devon Achane and also Raheem Mostert. So you're looking from pound for pound, right? You have the wide receivers, you have the offensive lines, you have the quarterbacks, you have the running backs here. And also, you don't have 2 great defenses by any measure. Maybe this game is going to be told on that young defensive line for the Los Angeles Rams as it's really starting to come into its own to get pressure on Tua Tagovailoa in the pocket. If they can't, we're on turf. It's going to be fast. We're not worried about any weather conditions. Why can't we see 50 points in this game? Both of these teams are capable of getting into the 20s, which puts you right in the shot to hit that total.
Tua Tagovailoa has been great in his return. He hasn't thrown for a ton of yardage, just 231 and 234, but he only has 13 total incompletions in his last 2 outings, only 3 last week, efficient against the Buffalo Bills. 3 touchdowns, has not thrown an interception, sacked just once in either of those 2 games. Matthew Stafford, though, as the Rams have now won 3 straight, and with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp at least in the starting lineup, in their last 2, 279 against the Vikings, 4 touchdowns, 298 and 2 touchdowns against the Seahawks last weekend. Donnie, if you had to pick one of these 2 quarterbacks to target tonight, who would you look at?
It's a great call because, again, I'm sort of in the mix with both of them because I think they have both ones. But if I expect, again, sometimes it's just paint by numbers. If the Miami Dolphins, I'm not too sure they can win this game, but I do know they'll probably be in the 20s. It's probably Tua Tagovailoa because the ability to hit the home run. Now, Cooper Kupp is a great wideout. Not necessarily I'm going to beat you for 65 to 70 yards. Puka Nacua, unbelievable body control, almost like a George Pickens of the West Coast, if you will. You throw it in his vicinity, he's going to come down with that catch. But the ability to have one play-action pass on your own 25-yard line with, Tyreek Hill on one side and on the other side, Jalen Waddle, it's probably Tua Tagovailoa. If you said, Donnie, which quarterback has a better chance to throw for 2 touchdowns tonight, I'm probably going to go Tua Tagovailoa.
Yeah, listen, I would agree. Both are at 1.5, a slight bit of over or a slight bit of juice on the over. I might do what I did for Monday night or Thursday night, rather, for Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, both quarterbacks to throw for at least 2 passing scores. I could see that tonight. Now, Devon Achane, since Tua Tagovailoa's return, 2 receiving touchdowns and a rushing score last week against Buffalo. That's 3 total touchdowns. Kyron Williams did not score last week, but had scored in 10 consecutive games for this Rams team. And you can see, DRS, what his odds are to hit Pater. when we look at these two backs, they are going to factor in to the offense in huge ways. And again, both heavily favored, Kyren Williams more so than Achane to hit pay dirt.
Yeah, it's hard to say no to both of them, but if I had to choose one, you're certainly going to take that price point and say minus 210 makes the most sense because there is no other lead dog on that team. You might see Mostert get a couple of those carries and steal touchdowns, which is frustrating when you get vultured, where Achane might do a lot of work and get a little bit of a breather inside the red zone. That doesn't happen for Kyren Williams. He's also a great pass catcher out of the backfield. So I'll cheat on this one. Instead of saying the minus 105 is the way I want to go, obviously the minus 210 makes way more sense because if you said forget about the price points, who's scoring tonight, it's Kyren Williams for me.
No wide receiver props listed for Miami, at least Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Again, the offense has been better. Tyreek yet to score since that opening game of the season or in Tua Tagovailoa's return. Now, here's the interesting component, DRS, as we look at the other side. If Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp play a fully healthy game together, how do they share the distribution? They have not played a ton of snaps together in Puka's career the last year and a half. In that first game against Minnesota, it was Puka Nacua. 9 targets, 7 grabs, more than 100 yards. Last week, Nacua dealing with a knee injury early, but that wasn't why he left. He got ejected for what they called a punch. It didn't really look like a vicious punch to me. So then Cooper Kupp, 11 grabs on 14 targets and more than the century mark as well. How do you approach the Rams wideouts for Monday night?
It's fantastic. Again, it's such a good problem to have when you're like a same-game player parlay type guy because it's not an all or one at this point. If Puka Nacua is injured, yeah, you're all in on Cooper Kupp. But when Nacua is out there along with Kupp, I tend to lean towards Nacua. I think the bigger plays can happen from that direction as opposed to the target monster Cooper Kupp.
And you see the yardage and the receptions props. They're very similar entering Monday night. The injury analysis and insight with the Pro Football Doc next.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the two big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions once again. His third 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Looking back on the NFL Sunday slate in week number 10. it's getting to crunch time. It's the second half of this 2024 NFL season, so the injuries perhaps even more impactful. To give you that injury analysis and insight live on this Monday on the early line, we turn to the doc, the pro football doc, Dr. David Chao, joining us live right here on this Monday on TEL. As always, Dr. Chao, we appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me. Middle of the season, basically. And in general, 85% is a pretty good week right now for health for any individual player.
It's good to know, Doc, because it's not just looking back on crazy or scary or significant injuries that might happen during the middle of the game. It's projecting out the remaining weeks for teams in contention or trying to figure out what the second half of their season holds. For the San Francisco 49ers, a team that entered this year a Super Bowl frontrunner in the NFC title favorites, it was huge to get Christian McCaffrey back on the field yesterday for the first time in 2024. Played a lot, wasn't overly productive on the ground, but still 107 scrimmage yards when all was said and done. He had missed the opening 8 games of this year for the 49ers, dealing with Achilles tendonitis, Doc, in both legs. How did Christian McCaffrey look to you in his season debut?
Look, he looked good. We expected him to look good. The worry, though, he played a lot of snaps, and he did fine. But the worry continues into next week. There is a propensity for early season, ramp-up injuries, acclimation injuries, muscle injuries. Not so much for the Achilles tendonitis. It happens around the league. You saw the early hamstrings or quads or things like that around the league. Let's hope CMC can avoid that because this is early season for him. His season just started. This is game 1 for him, basically. So hopefully the 49ers can avoid any sort of setback there. But overall, the 49ers are healthier. Debo, even Jordan Mason, Trent Williams, in general, they're healthier.
Doc, looking at some of these players, because I do think it's interesting with Christian McCaffrey. As a medical specialist here, what are you looking for this week out of practice for Christian McCaffrey? Are there some things that over the next day or two you'd see if there's any swelling or how he reacts to it, or you just let the player tell you how he's feeling, how his body reacts?
I think it's load management, right? Load management is a dirty word in the NBA because it affects games. But load management happens all the time in the NFL. During the practice week and during games, and it's all monitored, and it's just a continued ramp up of more usage of Christian McCaffrey in a safe way.
Yeah, so Doc, let's go to what we saw yesterday around the National Football League throughout a Sunday slate. I do want to start with Tristan Wirfs, who has been a staple for a Buccaneers team that can ill afford any more offensive injuries with what they have seen this year and how shorthanded they are. Dr. Chao, what did you and your team at Sports Injury Central see yesterday for the Buccaneers star offensive tackle?
From the war room, it looked like a right knee MCL sprain and hopefully not more. The MCL part has now been reported by national media. The more part, not yet, which we hope doesn't come true. But we see this being a multi-week absence in the best case scenario and even potentially IR. So Baker Mayfield continues to kind of, stay alive and rally his team. They didn't get the win in the end, but, they're snake bit with injuries down in Tampa.
Oh, they certainly are. A couple young tight ends, Doc, I want to talk to you about. Dalton Kincaid of the Buffalo Bills and also Sam Laporta of the Detroit Lions. For Kincaid, it's a knee. For Laporta, it's a shoulder. Any expectations on the length of these, or will they be okay?
Well, Dalton Kincaid returned to the game. He fell directly on his left knee. It's our belief by video he has a PCL sprain. Don't freak out. This is not the same degree of sprain as Puka Nacua. He did try and return to the game, left again, had a brace on. We do see this as a short-term absence, not as long as Puka Nacua from the preseason, missing all the time with the Rams. But it does mean that this game against the Chiefs is in jeopardy, at least, if not a little bit. Sam Laporta, we hope that he can roll through with his shoulder injury. Detroit, snuck out that win. They weren't looking good in the first half, but in the second half, they sure got it done and came back to steal the win.
Doc, quickly before we get to Monday Night Football, to ask about guys like Puka Nacua and the health, of course, for the Miami Dolphins. Just quickly want to ask you about Dak Prescott. We got the news earlier in the weekend that his season was most likely done, as he might need to have surgery on his injured hamstring. They said in the broadcast yesterday that he was still maybe seeking a second medical opinion. Where do you fall on what Dak Prescott's season has? Is there any chance we see him again in 2024 for Dallas?
Well, where we fall is where we started with, which is this is a different hamstring injury. It's hamstring tendon avulsion, not hamstring muscle tear, which is just time, rest, and what have you. The surgery would be to resect the tendon. I think he gets the surgery. And with the surgery, there is an outside chance he returns later in the season if the Cowboys stay alive. And that, at this point, is the biggest if of all. Can the Cowboys stay alive? What a difference it makes. You know, obviously Cooper Rush did a great job in the past subbing in for Dak Prescott. They were 5-1. But you know what the key difference is? Cooper Rush is the same guy, but Dallas isn't the same team. They can't run the ball. How many quarterbacks can be one-dimensional and be successful? Not very many, including Cooper Rush.
Doc, let's head over to SixScore.com and check out the field view for tonight's Monday Night Football game between the Dolphins and the Rams. First thing I want to ask you about here quickly is the Rams' offensive line. Looking pretty banged up coming into this one.
Well, you know, as banged up as they are, they're actually on the uprise, right? They were really injured when they had the start of the season. So they're directionally headed in the right direction. Yeah, it still shows on the field view. At this point of the season, we look at SixScore, SportsGrid Central, more direction like deltas. Like, we love the direction of the Patriots yesterday. They've been up 8 points over the last 3 weeks, and they beat Chicago there. Even though their score is relatively low, it's the week-to-week deltas that we start to look at now. We'll show you all that at Sports Injury Central. And, of course, the big question today is Tyreek Hill. The only thing I can tell you is I don't know a lot about his wrist injury, but the only thing I can tell you is there's no such thing as a true game-time decision. In the 17 years in the NFL, I never had a true game time decision. We had game time confirmations. We think he's going to go. Let's get him out there. Let's make sure. Oh, we think he's not going to go. Let's get him out there. Make sure. But it's a media-driven thing that it's a true game time decision.
Dr. Chao, as always, the insight is much appreciated. More on the early line next.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the two big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions. Once again. His third 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Your two premier NBA handicappers with you on this Monday to go all around the association, nearly at the 3-week point of this 2024-25 NBA campaign. And only one team still stands unblemished. That's the Cleveland Cavaliers at 11-0, hoping for 12 tonight in Chicago inside the United Center against the Bulls. 5 games on this Monday night NBA slate, where all 5 tip at 8 p.m. Eastern, or a few minutes after. 8-point spread, DRS, in favor of the Cavs on the road in Chicago, taking on the Bulls. 237 is the total. What do you like?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to stick with let the good times roll here with the Cleveland Cavaliers coming in relatively healthy. Garland, Mitchell, Okoro, Mobley, and Allen expected in that starting lineup. You do have a decent Bulls lineup, but if you're just being honest, you look at the numbers, it's a heavy slant towards the Cavaliers, and rightfully so. Most people aren't trying to step in the way of them. That line opened up at 7.5, now sits at 8. We'll see where that line ends up tonight, but why not, man? The Cavs are beating teams down and good teams down at that. I'll take the Cavs to handle their business on the road by double digits tonight.
Big win for Cleveland on Friday, blowing out the Golden State Warriors. It was the only road loss this year for the Dubs. Cleveland is perfect at 11-0. They have covered in 9 of the 11. They have gone over in 8 of the 11. That's a very large total at 237. Now, to blend the NBA with the NFL and just the temperature of sports in Chicago, Matt Eberflus, the head coach of the Bears, was doing a live radio show this morning, but his cell phone connection was so bad, DRS, he dropped off 3 times, leading to the ultimate cancellation of the interview. Was it a ploy, or was it just bad cell phone connection? The cell phone connection almost representative of what the Bears have dealt with this year on the turf.
Who's their president? Is it Kevin Warren, the guy who used to run the Big Ten? I believe that's his name. Maybe he was trying to call in and interfering there, trying to get a hold of him. You're like, yo, don't go on the radio. We got to work out how we're going to get you this compensation package as we get you out of town later in the day. Maybe it was that.
Do it again. What would Virginia McCaskey say about a bad cell phone connection?
Yeah, hold on. Here's how it would go. You show up at McCaskey Way or whatever the Bears practice facility is. You walk in the door, and Eberflus goes, Hallis Hall, Miss McCaskey, I'm so upset that we lost yesterday. You did such a good job, little boy. You tried your best. And who are you again? You say you coach my team? That's how it went down. Yeah, that's how it went down.
They told Virginia McCaskey about the cell phone.
Does she hang out there? What does she do during the day?
Does
she hang out there? Book clubs, maybe?
That's
what does she do there? Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Her son, George McCaskey, is the chairperson. Apparently, he drives a 1996 Toyota Camry to make sure that he can be frugal to try to spend all the money on the Bears. That's what they say. That's the lore out of the Windy City.
Of NFL ownership. Oh, my goodness.
He's the Mitch Trubisky of the job interview that the Bears then drafted Mitch Trubisky because he used to drive a beaten-up Toyota to show his work ethic. It ain't working in the Windy City. They told Virginia about the dropped cell phone connection. She said, cell phones? Our stand-up comedy bit is over. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Hello, Sonny, I can't hear you through the tin can. What did you say? You're the coach of the Bears?
There you go. How about that? Yeah.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun. I really like Mondays with you, DRS. We should do it more often. All right, Oklahoma City tonight for the Thunder. It is. The Thunder got beat last night big at home by Golden State. And some more bad news for OKC. They're promising third-year player Chet Holmgren, who missed the entirety of his rookie season, then was mostly healthy last year, is now going to be out for 8 to 10 weeks dealing with a hip fracture. OKC only 2 losses off to an 8-2 start. They are a 7-point home favorite tonight against the Clippers.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The last 7 games. The reason I bring that up here is I'm trying to focus on the Clippers themselves to make some money myself. How about Norman Powell, Ben? At least 3 or more 3-point shots made over his past 7 games. That's the way I look tonight. And also, you might be catching OKC on that down. Oh, no. Chet's going to be gone for 3 months here. The 3-point shots need to rain down here for the Clippers. I'll take the Clippers tonight. Give me the 7 points here and a lot of 3-point shots by my guy, Norm.
The Clips have played 7 of their first 10 games at the Intuit Dome, but they are a perfect 3-0 straight up on the road. More injury news for the Pels. Zion Williamson out for some time. They're a slight home underdog tonight in the Big Easy against the Nets.
Some people's bodies are just broken at birth at this point. That's one of those where we wanted to see so much excitement out of Zion, and the fact he is never going to be healthy. But you know what? They'll probably re-up him for like a $400 million contract in the next year and a half anyway, just to do that. So
the Pels have lost 4 straight. It is not good. Prop perspective on this Monday with Tom Vecchio next.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, it's going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions once again. His 3rd 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The prop perspective on this Monday was SportsGrid's Tom Vecchio to set the stage for the Monday night finale in Los Angeles between the Rams and the Dolphins. Vecchio, as always, we appreciate the time. Thank you for being here. How was the weekend looking back on the Sunday slate around the NFL?
Thanks for having me. It was a good weekend overall, hit on a couple of touchdowns. I was on the Lions last night. They didn't obviously come through in terms of covering the spread, but their late comeback did stage a spot for me to pick up some SGPs, which was nice. Hopefully that will carry over into tonight's game. I think we're in for an awesome one tonight. Obviously, the news of Tyreek Hill, I think, plays one of the key components for tonight. So let's roll.
Yeah, absolutely, Vecchio, because right now, no wide receiver props out for the Dolphins. The tight end, Jonnu Smith, a couple of the backs,
DK,
including Devon.
On DK,
Tom Vecchio, you're on a beautiful. But hold on, Tom.
Wow.
Tom, you don't see the 3 box here, but on the bottom right corner, we have a beautiful logo of the FanDuel Sportsbook on this wonderful program that is the Early Line. So we don't talk about competitor sportsbooks here on this program at the very least.
Nice to know you, Tom.
So,
okay. we can roll.
Listen, on other wonderful SportsGrid shows, any book, shop the market, find the best number. At least here on the FanDuel sponsored show, we try to keep it to FD, but we'll dive through the rest of it, Vecchio, and learn the numbers. We kid, Vecchio, we're giving you a harder time than anything that is necessary. All right, as we look at the numbers for this game, though, competitive Monday night finale to end out week number 10. 2.5-point spread, Vecchio, in favor of the Rams at home in the City of Angels, total at 48.5. Rather high total, short spread. What are the numbers telling you about the flow of tonight's game in SoFi?
I'm going to be on the Rams, and I do think we will see some points tonight. What we have seen from the Dolphins defense, I think we need to take with a bit of a grain of salt when we're looking back at their schedule. They're playing the Colts, not a good offense. They're playing the Patriots. They're playing the Titans. Like some of these teams that, we're viewing as legitimately bottom tier teams overall. So when we see some of their numbers, when they're, like relatively good against wide receivers overall, I don't think that's actually true. And I think we want to kind of lean on the Rams, a team that's clearly trending up as of now. They're getting healthier. And I want to be on the Rams. I want to be on the Rams for a lot of props. But again, that Tyreek Hill news does impact this game overall, because if he's not out there, if he's a decoy, if he's not 100%, whatever you want to call it, that's going to impact how much the Dolphins are going to be able to kind of, punch back in this game. And thus, that's going to impact what the Rams need to or have to do on offense. So while I like Kyren Williams and I like Puka Nacua tonight, at a certain point, they may not need to have 100 yards through the air for both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, just because if the Dolphins can't get anything going on offense, this is going to be a ground game for Kyren Williams.
Let's take a look at those quarterbacks tonight. No shortage of talent. Matthew Stafford taking on Tua Tagovailoa. 250.5 for Matthew Stafford tonight as his passing yards prop. 244.5 for Tua Tagovailoa. The touchdown props here, both at 1.5 and both negative juice here. Minus 128 for Stafford. Tua at minus 114. Is it so simple, Tom, that you might have to wait a little bit longer to get some information on Tyreek Hill before you make a move? Or is it decided no, you don't really care about the injuries to Tyreek Hill per se, or is it just a Matthew Stafford night for you?
I think it is a Matthew Stafford night, and, the Tyreek Hill news, if you want to jump early, that's certainly fine. You just want to be in because you think even if he's out, Tua's going to have to pass the ball, right? Mm-hmm. And the Rams are going to be playing from ahead. They're going to be out not just by 2.5 points, they're going to be out by 6.5. Thus, the Dolphins have to pass the ball, so you just jump on Tua now because they have to do it. I do like some passing touchdowns for Stafford, so I'm willing to go over on the 1.5. I'm willing to go over on the yards. The attempts thing is what I'm kind of struggling with, which is normally a market I like to go to for quarterbacks. But if Tyreek's not there, again, my point being, the Rams may not have to push out the entire game. They'll get up to a certain amount, and then it's going to be a Kyren Williams game. So I'm interested in Stafford's attempts prop, but I'm kind of waiting on that Tyreek news.
Stafford has thrown for at least 275 plus in the last two games for LA. Of course, 2 consecutive wins against the Vikings and the Seattle Seahawks. I do want to ask you, Vecchio, despite the uncertainty around Tyreek Hill, about Tua Tagovailoa and the Dolphins offense, there has been no doubt that with Tua Tagovailoa returning to the lineup in the last 2 games, the offense has looked so much better. They had not scored more than 20 points in their first 6. They have scored at least 27. In fact, exactly 27 in each of their previous 2 games. How do you evaluate this Dolphins offense now with Tua Tagovailoa back under center?
Obviously, it elevates everyone around him. One of the players, Devon Achane, I think, is going to be in for a big night, regardless if Tyreek Hill was fully healthy, right? There was no injury concern about him. I think we are going to see a little bit of pressure on Tua, and a lot of those passes for Achane should be there. I mean, he's a running back where the reception prop's sitting at 5.5, so he's going to be involved in the passing game. So you want to go to Achane as maybe the most consistent option overall. I think that's certainly an option. I tweeted about Jonnu Smith for a touchdown after the Tyreek Hill news was released, just because he does see a good red zone usage. He's actually tied for 3rd on the team. So if Tyreek Hill is out, we're going to see some other players step up, and I want to kind of jump on those numbers early.
Always tough to bet into somebody you think might have an injury issue, but Tyreek Hill, again, the wheels aren't the problem. It's a risk. Right. Now, he did take the flight out there. Looks to be a game-time decision. We'll see how much that's going to be effective. But sometimes just watching the pregame warm-ups and getting some feeds from the beat writer can help. But let me ask you this question. If Tyreek Hill does play, and let's just say he's a little bit of damaged goods, who picks up the scraps for the Dolphins at wide receiver?
It would be going to Jalen Waddle. I will also say, if Tyreek is injured and it's a wrist issue, I could see them drawing up plays where they get him coming out of the backfield, and then thus Tyreek rushing yards, which we do see at times, right? These little like jet sweeps or like one of those little like pitch plays, right? That they do that Mahomes does to Kelsey, like those little kind of toss plays just to get the ball into his hands where he actually doesn't have to catch it. So then we can get Tyreek running. So maybe a combined rushing plus receiving for Tyreek. But then, of course, looking to Jalen Waddle, players kind of slow. I want to say like slow in terms of production, but I've got to remember like their offense wasn't cooking for however many weeks that Tua was out. So I'm interested in going to Jalen Waddle, but I actually do think there is some value in Tyreek props if he does play, but he may not be at 100%. Looking to combine for Tyreek could be the answer.
And again, when you look at Tyreek Hill and that touchdown price, he hasn't scored since the season opener. He has not found pay dirt in any of the two games with Tagovailoa back in the lineup. Now let's get to the Rams wideout conversation. Puka Nacua is healthy. He is back. He was healthy last week dealing with a knee injury, but was ejected in the opening half for a punch in Seattle. So it was all Cooper Kupp. Vecchio, these two guys have not played a lot together on the same field in Nacua's year and a half in the NFL. If they both are healthy and they are both out there for the entirety of the game tonight, how do you view their props? Which guy do you favor in front of the other?
Both are great. It's like a 1A, 1B scenario. I honestly love the fact that Puka got ejected last week, and like this is his time to show up, right? He comes back against the Vikings. He's awesome in that game, but doesn't score a touchdown. Last week, obviously, he gets ejected. Cooper Kupp has a big game. Like this is the time for him to be fully involved in the offense and score. So I like Puka over 67.5 yards. I like him for a TD. I like him at 80+ yards at plus 142. I think this is a Puka Nacua game for the Rams. Last week was, weird stuff happens on the field, but I will certainly take him. It's not to say that I don't like Cooper Kupp tonight, but I want to see Puka get fully involved in the offense. I think it's going to be Stafford, Puka, Kyren as my top three options from the Rams.
There you go. Taking a look at the top props right there. Kyren Williams over 19.5 yards. Puka Nacua over 67.5 receiving yards and an anytime touchdown from Nacua and Jonnu Smith. If I ask you one play of those four or something else, give me something interesting tonight to watch out on some of these prop bets for us, Tom.
I do like... Kyren can always be involved in the passing game as well. So I would say Kyren over attempts and Stafford over completions, maybe ahead of attempts, just because I expect them to be efficient. They want to get the ball. Puka Nacua doesn't have a deep ADOT. It's only sitting at 11.3 yards. So I want to see him get the ball, move the chains. And then if the Rams are out ahead and the offense for the Dolphins isn't moving, I do think we're going to see 100+ yards from Kyren Williams.
22.5, the completions prop for Matthew Stafford. It should be a great game tonight to end out week number 10. And you'll see Tom Vecchio before Monday night kicks off on the pregame show here on SportsGrid to get you set. Vecchio, thank you for being here on this Monday. We always appreciate the time.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
We give you our thoughts on Monday Night Football next on TEL.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the two big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, it's going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions once again. His third 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
It is time to finish out our breakdown and preview of the Monday night finale for week number 10 of this 2024 NFL season. Live right here on this Monday on the early line. It's the Rams, it's the Dolphins in Los Angeles inside SoFi Stadium. The Rams a 2.5-point home favorite against the Miami Dolphins. Over-under stands at 48.5. DRS, let's just start with the game itself, its impact and importance tonight. The Rams a slight home favorite, less than 3. The Dolphins an underdog once again with Mike McDaniel as the skipper. Only 7-11 against the spread since he became the head man in South Florida starting in 2022. Only 3 outright wins. And although...
Look at that. Prime time DRS right now for this game tonight. So as Ben was setting up, I believe what he was trying to tell us here is the Miami Dolphins and the Los Angeles Rams are going to be a good game tonight. It's a 2.5-point line. But if we're looking at this game optimistically, it really points toward the Rams for me. If you're looking at the Rams setup tonight as the 2.5-point favorite, they're the better team. They're the team that still has some playoff hopes here. And the Miami Dolphins sort of careening off the road. Ben, the tough part tonight for me, honestly, is the fact that Tyreek Hill didn't practice all week. I don't think he's playing coy tonight saying, I just didn't practice and my wrist is going to be 100% healthy. Because as we talked to Tom, there's a difference between getting a handoff in the backfield and protecting yourself and trying to catch a laser beam away from you 20 yards away and then getting tackled and bracing yourself on the turf here. I'm worried about that Miami Dolphins offensive explosion if Tyreek Hill can't be the player that we think he can be here tonight.
Absolutely so, DRS, and he was that leading receiver for Tua and the Finns last week in Buffalo, yet to find pay dirt since week number 1 of this season, or in any, of course, of the 2 games since Tagovailoa's return. And Donnie, for the odds makers here on FanDuel, not to have the odds out yet for the wide receiver positions is a little bit concerning. Because, of course, the impact of Hill's either availability or absence then impacts what Jalen Waddle is going to be able to do. Jonnu Smith has been a consistent, really for any quarterback this year for Miami. I would keep an eye on his numbers. But again, the Dolphins, of course, the story of the season has been the head injury to Tua Tagovailoa and his murky future at times in his football career and in 2024. And because of that, Miami is 2-6. They have not looked great. They have looked better with Tua Tagovailoa back, but they are in such a hole. And again, Donnie, for the Dolphins, losing this game by 2 or 1 in covering means nothing. Losing this game by 3 means nothing. It's an outright win that Miami is desperate for. Only 3 outright victories in the 18 games now as an underdog with Mike McDaniel. Meanwhile, for the Rams, their season has been resurrected. 2 wins in a 5-day span. They backed that up with the extended mini bye last week on Sunday, going into Seattle and holding on in overtime to knock off the Seahawks. You heard from Dr. Chao, although there are still some injuries to pay attention to for LA, their Delta, where they are trending, is so much more positive now than it was in the opening month of this season. And frankly, Donnie, that's why I believe the Rams are the right side in the correctly favored side of only 2.5.
And also, like, Tyreek Hill being injured or not at 100% is a massive deal. So then we usually say that, hey, Jalen Waddle's a sensational wideout, first-round draft pick, gets a ton of money and has that explosive ability. Did you see his last 3 games? Colts game, 1 for 11. Cardinals game, 4 for 45. Last week against the Bills, 2 catches, -4 yards. Like, this isn't what we've expected here. Is he able to just step in and be that number one if Tyreek Hill can't do that and maybe buying at a lower price? I'm not so sure of that. So I got a lot of information I need to dissect this afternoon, which a lot of it does deal with, is Tyreek Hill playing or not, and the effectiveness, which might come down to just the pregame and saying, hey, Tyreek's running his routes. He's catching the football fine. If I see that, I'm probably going to be back in on Tyreek Hill. You know what? Touchdown props over his yardage prop. But that's going to be tricky. Are they going to do one of those like, hey, Ben Roethlisberger in the playoffs like a decade ago against the Broncos? He hasn't thrown all week. He didn't throw in pregame, only to uncork bombs right away to start the game. I think we might be playing a little bit coy here on Tyreek Hill. That's what I'm trying to decipher today. But I'm not just immediately going the water like, oh, he's been producing. He hasn't.
So if we're focusing then on LA, because a lot less uncertainty on the side of the Rams, Matthew Stafford, 1.5 touchdowns is his passing touchdowns prop. He has thrown for at least 275 in 2 consecutive games. You compare that to Tua Tagovailoa. You could look at the running backs, Kyren Williams, Devon Achane, or, of course, the wideouts that we know for LA. How are you approaching the Rams' perspective for Monday night?
It's got definitely Kyren Williams. If I think the Rams are going to be winning, which means extra carries in the fourth quarter, that plays into it. But the ability to hit a home run for Kyren Williams, I love. 83.5 is no cheap prop here. So you're basically looking at him getting around the century, which I think he can. If you're buying in on the Miami Dolphins, you want that explosive play out of Devon Achane. Can he get 7, 8, 9 carries and get 60 yards? Of course he can. But also the vulture touchdowns from Raheem Mostert. The one thing that you have to love about is you're not worried about that technically from a Rams perspective. The full bulk of the carries and the passing game is probably going to run through Kyren Williams as opposed to Achane and Mostert on that side. But if you are looking at Tyreek Hill, as we just told you, banged up and not performing in Jalen Waddle, maybe Devon Achane picks it up out of the backfield as well. If you said, Donnie, one running back that you love in this game, it's Kyren Williams. But Devon Achane does have the ability to score a touchdown and get a lot of play tonight if we're down some of those weapons or some of those weapons are hobbled tonight.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You heard from Tom Vecchio. 5.5 is the receptions prop for Achane. Just how much he's going to factor into this passing attack for Miami should be noted. The Dolphins haven't been great this year. They are the 6th best passing defense. I think those numbers slightly skewed because Miami was trailing so much without Tua Tagovailoa. They were playing from behind, teams trying to run out the clock on them. Kyren Williams had scored in 9 consecutive games prior to last week. That did come to a close. And again, Donnie, when you look at Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, it's going to be hard to determine who that lead wide receiver is, and the odds makers having a difficult time as well. Look how closely tied those numbers are tonight for Kupp and Nacua.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And it's a great problem to have, as we like to say, because how many times you say, oh, I like Puka Nacua tonight. There goes Kupp, 9 catches, 114 yards and 2 scores. Nacua, 6 catches, 60 yards in those scores. But I do think Matthew Stafford is probably the big winner tonight. The one expectation I have is Matthew Stafford's going to be a top performer tonight, and 2 touchdown passes, that should be on the docket for us.
I like that. I like what Vecchio had to say about Nacua hitting Paydirt. I think Jonnu Smith makes some sense, and even Devon Achane. DRS, you'll have some time to cipher through this all of this information before NFL football in-game live game day tonight with Kevin Walsh and Joe Lisi. Enjoy the money line. We'll talk Thursday. More on the early line next.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions. Once again. His 3rd 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to this Monday Live right here on the Early Line on SportsGrid and all across the SportsGrid network. We round out this Monday with a solo mission for the final few minutes to look at the second week of the 2024-25 college basketball season, tipping off tonight. Plenty of ranked teams in action and some compelling games ahead of tomorrow in the Champions Classic. We'll get Kentucky and Duke, Kansas and Michigan State. We'll talk about those games on a Tuesday night tomorrow, of course, to set the stage for the second full week of the college basketball season. Let's look at the docket and what we have tonight. Will Wade's McNeese State team heads to Tuscaloosa to take on number 2 Alabama. 20.5-point spread in favor of the Crimson Tide has actually worked its way down early on this Monday, just 18 and a hook in favor of the Tide, who covered in their opener, did not cover in their second game of the year, and despite a potent offense yet to play to the over so far this season. Again, only 2 games. Now, McNeese is a team out of the Southland that is going to be one of the better mid-major teams we expect around the country this year. But they did lose their season opener to another strong mid-major out of the Summit League, that being South Dakota State. McNeese was booked as a double-digit favorite in that game, lost outright. Total tonight, 166.5, a slight bit of juice on the over. I do think we see some points. Iowa State against UMKC. They look good to start this year. One of the best defensive teams in the country, 27.5-point favorite against Kansas City. Texas A&M bouncing back from an opening loss this season against UCF. They take on Lamar. Now 1-1 are the Aggies under Buzz Williams, 23.5-point favorite. Big blow for Purdue, as we learned yesterday. They're 7'4". Yes, they have another 7'4" big man, Daniel Jacobson, the freshman from Chicago, out for the remainder of this year for the Boilers. He injured his leg, I believe a fractured tibia. He is out for the remainder of this season. He will redshirt. Is Purdue going to play small ball? More than likely not. They still have Will Berg, the 7'2" Swedish man, who is going to be there for the Boilermakers against a tournament team in Yale who won the Ivy last year and, of course, upset Auburn in the round of 64. Purdue a 16.5-point favorite. We have yet to see Ace Bailey for Rutgers. We did see St. Peter's keep it tight with Seton Hall last week on the opening night. And then Seton Hall got beat by Fordham over the weekend. Not a great start to this season in Orange. For South Orange, for Shaheen Holloway and this Hall ball team. Might Ace Bailey make his debut tonight for Rutgers? They're a 15.5-point favorite in that showdown in the Garden State. Now let's take a moment to talk about the game sandwiched in between the two Big Ten teams on your board. That is Florida. They're a 23.5-point favorite against Grambling State. That is not the story. The head coach, Todd Golden of the Gators, is the story. In his second year in Gainesville, Todd Golden is now under investigation by the university for multiple Title IX investigations into sexual harassment claims made by students at Florida. This was uncovered in a great student newspaper piece late last week by the Alligator. Again, the student newspaper and the student journalists doing the hard work there in Gainesville. Todd Golden has now retained some legal advice. He is going to push back on these claims. And despite the inquiry into these sexual harassment and Title IX claims, Todd Golden remains the active head coach for Florida. He is coaching tonight for the Gators. I don't think that's the correct call, but that is the call that Scott Strickland, the AD in Gainesville, has made. Any developments to that investigation, of course, we will bring you. It was an interesting opening weekend around college basketball. Maybe you heard the headlines on Friday night. The Auburn team plane having to redirect and land as they were headed to Houston to take on the Cougs because of a fight among teammates on the plane. Then what did Auburn do? They go to H-Town and they upset Houston in a matchup between the two top-rated teams in KenPom. Still the top two rated, but Auburn moves in front of Houston. You saw the team, Janai Broome and many of the Tigers, flying around after the game looking like a plane. They're leaning in. Auburn is a team to be reckoned with this year in the SEC. Again, the opening week of college basketball officially comes to a close tonight, if you will. It started a week ago, a huge Tuesday night slate in the Champions Classic with some of the blue bloods in the sport facing off. We'll preview it tomorrow when the early line returns, 8 a.m. Eastern on a Tuesday on SportsGrid.